Hello, and welcome to Part 4 of the International Social Service Essential Services series. In this online training, we will go over ISS-USA's background checks training. Although every state is different, background checks are a standard component of home studies in the United States. Typically, ISS asks for criminal background checks and child abuse registry checks. These may also be known as police record checks. In most cases, individual family members need to obtain background checks on themselves. ISS-USA cannot formally request background checks on others. Even though you may not be able to independently get a background check on someone else, it is important to understand the process as you will be asked to guide the family. Responsibility for background checks. It is your responsibility as the social work contractor to get the background checks process started. Each state has a different process for this. We ask you to learn the basic process in your state and be a resource for the families you are working with. Part of your role as an assessor is to build trust with families and, when necessary, support them through requirements related to the home study. If you encounter any difficulties or problems in the process of obtaining a background check, don't hesitate to reach out and contact us so we can report back to the requesting agency and let them know what's going on. Every state looks different, so make sure to do research on your state and find out whether or not you can complete the background checks online, through downloadable forms, through notarized forms, or even at the police station. The internet is a great resource for researching your state's laws. As you compile your research, it could be helpful to create a cheat sheet that you can provide the family with that gives basic information and instruction for filling out a background check, which can be a huge resource for a family. However, it is not required. Everyone has a different process. It is important to emphasize that background checks are more than just paperwork and a box to check. They provide extra assurance and information to help us feel more secure in the recommendations we are making. Discovering undisclosed information about a family can provide relevant information about a family's situation and can aid us in making an informed recommendation. Remember, finding activity on a background check does not necessarily disqualify a family for placement. Many people have history, including nonviolent offenses and incidents from long ago that do not reflect a person's current circumstance. A background check allows us to address any information found in order to appropriately assess each situation in any given home study. Furthermore, sending in a recommendation without seeing a family's history can create issues or discrepancies down the line. Basic expectations and how-tos. When it comes to basic expectations, it is important to be aware of a couple of things. 1. Families should be made aware that background checks are a standard part of a home study, and failure to provide them may result in delays or difficulties in placement. Communicating this with families early in the process is essential. This should be explained during the first engagement call. Secondly, families should receive basic instruction or information on how to obtain background checks in their state. Remember, background checks and child abuse registry checks vary by state, so be sure to inform the family with instruction either through the use of a cheat sheet, as mentioned earlier, online instruction, available forms, or any other type of written instruction on how to visit their local police department. Copies of their results can be sent directly to them or to your agency's address, if applicable. While copies can be sent to ISS-USA, there may be some delays in processing. When done this way, the case number in ISS Case Manager needs to be clearly listed to prevent confusion and delays. Third, make sure that the family knows the expectation that they need to provide a copy of the background check so you can finalize their recommendation. Next, let's go over some possible limitations which you may encounter during the process. 1. As mentioned, most independent contractors cannot obtain background checks on others. Therefore, it is the responsibility of the family to fulfill this requirement, as we don't have control over this aspect of the work. 2. Another limitation is leisureliness. Despite the potential motivating factor of placement of a child in their home, some families take more time completing tasks such as filling out paper, getting fingerprinted, getting notaries, and printing. 3. Additionally, there is almost always a cost associated with getting a background check, varying from state to state. If there are multiple adults living in a home, that cost can add up. The cost of the background check is the family's responsibility. ISS-USA cannot reimburse families for this cost directly. A note on costs. If we are contracting with you as an agency or entity that can obtain background checks, you can include this in your quote to ISS-USA to be included in the SOW. We cannot reimburse these costs without your prior approval. What to do if a family expresses financial difficulty in paying a background checks fee? They should talk to the child's worker about reimbursement. We do not expect private contractors to write checks or make personal charges on their credit cards for this. Please review financials more carefully. If background checks are a financial burden, there may be larger concerns for the financial status of the family. Definitely communicate this to your case manager so they are aware of that issue and can communicate that to the child's worker. It should also trigger a larger conversation about their overall financial status. If the expense of paying for background checks is truly a burden to them, there needs to be further conversation about the family's situation, as additional children in the home can be a significant financial burden. Documenting efforts. Where to send results. The best option, where possible, is for the family to request a personal copy of their background checks so that they receive it and send a copy to the social worker. For interstate cases, copies can be sent directly to the child's caseworkers, who can share it with us. Copies can also be sent to the CO, the ISS case manager, though this may result in some delays. Please note that contract social workers should not receive results at their personal address. Contract social workers should request a copy of the official results. Timeline. Repeat, repeat, repeat. 1. Discuss the background check requirement with families when you make your introductory call. 2. If you are willing to proceed with the interview prior to receiving completed background checks, follow up on the status during your home study interview. 3. Once your report is written, follow up with the family and let them know that you can submit your report, but that it will have a conditional recommendation until background checks are received. If you completed your report and have still not received copies of the family's background checks, reach out to the family and let them know that you will submit your report with a conditional recommendation. However, if you personally feel uncomfortable submitting any kind of report until background checks are received, that's your prerogative, and we will communicate that with the requesting agency. Please make sure you communicate that with your case manager from the beginning, and that the conversation is happening regularly. Let's talk about some exceptions to obtaining a background check. Some individuals need regular background checks for their employment. We can accept copies of existing background checks as long as they are not outdated. However, employment in a sector that requires security clearance or background checks is typically not proof enough. We need physical copies of those background checks. Documentation. Remember, it is not your job to approve or reject a home study. It is your job to document all your efforts and make an informed recommendation. Our job is to be assessors, and in that role, our main responsibility is to be documenters. Don't make us look for clues. If efforts to seek background checks aren't mentioned in the report, we don't assume they've been done. Look at our home study template, and specifically at the criminal history section for reference. If you don't have the result of the background check at the time you are submitting your report, and you have consistently reminded the family, document your efforts in your report using clear language. You can state that no criminal childhood history was disclosed during the interview process, and that you, as the assessor, provided the family with information on how to obtain them, and at the time results had not been received. You can also be more specific with reasons as to why the family has had a delayed process, if you are made aware of them. If you don't have the background check, we just ask that you make note of that and express that the recommendation is conditional upon their receipt. Please follow up with your case manager if you have any more questions or need more resources. We would also like to direct you to our other training and the Essential Services series, which can be accessed on our YouTube channel. Find the links to these trainings in the description of the video or on our YouTube channel. We encourage you to watch each of these webinars before you complete your first service and refer back to it for assistance as you go. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and be a valued independent contractor for ISS-USA.